You're watching GAB with ALisa Profiles on MetroCast Channel 10. Thanks so much for joining me. Today we're going to profile Dr. Tuajuanada Jordan from St. Mary's College. When we talk to people on this program, it's because they've done something incredible in our community and they're doing something for those that are coming behind. One word description of our guest today, influential. Influencing a number of women and our young people for generations to come. She's also influenced her own family. We're going to profile Dr. Tuajuanada Jordan on GAB with ALisa Profiles on MetroCast Channel 10. We'll be right back.
Why smart people buy their used cars from Jack Fitzgerald. Reason number 1.
The most important reason to buy a car from us is our 138-point inspection report. We check the car out thoroughly, and we put a copy of that report in your glove compartment so that you know as much about that car as we do before you buy it.
Shop our entire used car inventory at fitzmall.com.
And that's the Fitz way. There's just no better way to go.
Moving into a new area is always tough, especially when it comes to problems in your home. We were unpacking our last box when our heat stopped working. I had no idea who to call until a neighbor suggested Booth's Heating and Air. And from the first phone call, right up to the final quality check, I was given professional customer service. Well, now we're all settled in, and next time, I'll know exactly who to call.
I'm Wayne Booth with Booth's Heating and Air Conditioning. Thank you for your business.
Welcome back to GAB with ALisa Profiles as we profile Dr. Tuajuanada Jordan from St. Mary's College. Thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to come and be with us.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
As a college president, I know that your days are full and they're busy. You started today at 6 o'clock in the morning meeting with people, and your day is full all of the way through. And when you told me about that at the beginning of the program, I thought to myself, that's really just a snapshot of who you are, what your work ethic is, and what your passion is. You recently became the 7th president at St. Mary's College, which in and of itself is such an incredible accomplishment. But really for your career, that's just one in step after step after step of decisions that you've made. So let's take a couple of minutes, if you will, and introduce you to those in St. Mary's County who may not be aware of you and all of the things that you have done. So let's talk a little bit about growing up, where you come from, and your career so far.
You know, it's always hard to talk about your career.
It is.
But I grew up in Charlottesville, Virginia. I was born a long time ago. And my family was traditional. I lived with both my parents. I'm the oldest of 4 kids. We were just a normal family, I thought, and I didn't realize that there was something not normal with respect to the American tradition of what they expected until I went to college.
Okay.
And that's when I realized that we were not rich.
Gotcha.
And then I started thinking about my life and realized, well, we must not have been rich. My dad was a welder. He would get laid off sometimes. My mother wasn't working sometimes because she was taking care of the family. When my dad would get laid off, then they would be struggling with food, trying to figure out, you know, what we'd eat for dinner. And they were great parents. They're still alive, but the rule, they would always let the children eat first. And then whatever was left, they ate. So we had this great family that on Sundays would go to the park together and do those kinds of things. But we didn't take vacations like you'd see some people do. And they just instilled in me this very strong work ethic. And also something in me that I could not fail. Gotcha. So watching my maternal grandmother, who was probably one of the greatest influences of my life, she was a domestic.
Okay.
Live-in domestic, and she only had 3rd grade education.
Goodness.
And my mother, incredibly smart, but in that day and time she didn't go to college. And watching them try to take care of their families and some of the struggles, and they would tell me, you always have to make sure you can take care of yourself and your responsibilities, and that I had to go to college, and that was the motivation to do that.
I love the story that you tell. I am so incredibly enamored of people that talk about stories coming from families that really built them up and gave them such a strong foundation. And it's interesting how you talk about your parents and perspectives. When you were growing up, you didn't realize, you used the term not rich, but earlier you talked about you were poor. You were actually poor. And a perspective as a child, I had no idea. You know, I always had something to eat. I was always taken care of. And now as an adult, you look back and you realize the foundation that your parents gave to you and also your grandmother. So how do you go from that kind of a background all the way, fast forward to 2014 when you became the president of St. Mary's College? I love meeting people, and I love the opportunity on this program to kind of deconstruct people's lives for the purpose of showing other people you can do whatever you put your mind to. So how did you go from that background? You knew you couldn't fail. Your mom was very supportive, your grandmother incredibly encouraging, but how do you progress through life from poverty, basically, to being president of a college?
So last week I gave a talk at Wagner College in New Jersey. I was the keynote for Black History Month. And that was amazing to me to think that I'm Black history, right? Yeah. And the beginning of the talk really did trace my career path. And at every juncture, there was someone who appeared, and I called that segment of my talk the influencers. So there were always people who provided advice or direction at critical points that helped me to get to where I am. And I used to, when I was talking to students, I always tell them, you must always do your best. Doesn't matter what the circumstance, you put your best out there because there's no telling who's going to be watching you.
Right.
And one day when you might be at a place where you just don't know, someone will open up a door for you and guide and point you in the right direction. And that's exactly what my life has been like. I mean, when I got to college, let's go back to high school. I mean, in high school, they put us on tracks based on how smart they thought you were.
Right.
And so I was in a college-ready, college prep track, and most of my friends were not. And so I would only see my friends in the evening, and in the daytime it was another group of people.
Okay.
And I always made sure that I did my homework before I went to hang out with my friends, because it's important to take care of business first.
Right.
But then I hated science up until the point I got until the 11th grade. And it was at the 11th grade I had the coolest chemistry teacher you can imagine. And when I really think back at it, he wasn't the greatest teacher, but he looked beautiful, right? And that motivated me to learn. And
really?
I loved chemistry. And then I realized, because my grandmother and my mother kept saying, you have to go to college, that I was going to go to college as a scientist. But I went as a biology major because I thought chemistry was too hard. And I went thinking I was going to be a biologist, but then when I got there, I realized I really hated biology. So I became a chemist. Because in biology, back then, they didn't teach it as well as they teach it now.
Right.
And you would just memorize things.
Right.
And I'm not going to memorize something if I don't see the point. And so I would just get so frustrated, and I would always ask why, and the teachers could never tell me why. So that was like, I'm not doing this at all. And when I decided I didn't decide I was going to go to graduate school. My speech communications professor, when I was a sophomore. So I gave a talk, and she told me I was too distracting with my hands because I talk with my hands. And one time she tied my hands while I gave a speech. It was the worst speech I ever gave in my entire life.
I understand that.
And so afterwards we were talking about the experience, and then she said at one point, she says, Jordan, you're smart. You need to go and apply to the MARC program, Minority Access to Research Careers. I had absolutely no idea what research was about. But I go, and her name was Gladys I. Ford, and we used to call her Dr. G.I. and salute her when she wasn't looking, because she was the most rigid professor in the world. So if she told you to do something, you did it. And I applied to that program, and in the application they said, you had to keep your grades up. I could do that. You had to do research as an undergraduate. I didn't know what that was about, but I figured I could get that done.
Sure.
And you had to go to graduate school and get a PhD in the sciences. Now, if you did those things, while you were doing that, they would pay your tuition, room and board, and give you a stipend.
And that spoke to you.
And that was motivation for me.
You
but
betcha.
I did not understand this PhD in the sciences thing. And I just said, I will do that. And then I asked the question, what if I don't get a PhD in the sciences? And they said, if you don't get a PhD in the sciences, you're going to pay back all the money. Well, that's motivation, right?
That is motivation.
And that's what sent me to graduate school.
That is an incredible story. And I thought it was interesting that you talked about the people in your speech through the course of your life as being your influencers. And I did not realize that when I introduced you. Do you realize that now you are influential? I want to take a quick break right now, and when we come back, I want to ask you your thoughts about being influential and talk some more about grad school and your students and your passion. You will not believe what Dr. Jordan is passionate about. We'll be back in just a moment. You're watching GAB with ALisa Profiles on MetroCast Channel 10.
Changing times brings changing needs. That's why, for your convenience, Booth's Heating and Air have extended their service hours to 10 hours a day, Monday through Saturday, at regular service rates. Through rigorous training classes and courteous business practices, Booth's technicians always go above and beyond to provide you with award-winning customer service that you can trust. Booth's Heating and Air, serving the Southern Maryland area since 1993.
In financing, our focus is on saving you money and getting you the best terms. And our customers will tell you that.
I had a bad experience someplace else. All she wanted me to do the minute I walked in wasn't look at cars, was fill out a credit app. So when I came here, they were all about me, not about closing a deal. I feel so compelled to tell everybody that buying a car as a single woman, it can be really fun. My name is Cheryl, and I am an ecstatic Fitzgerald customer.
You're watching GAB with ALisa Profiles as we talk to Dr. Tuajuanada Jordan from St. Mary's College. We talked in the last segment about all of the decisions that you made, all of the steps that you took. You decided to go to college and you stepped into a program where you would end up being in a PhD program in the sciences, which is very entertaining when you look back and you say how much you did not enjoy the sciences when you were in high school. It's also dramatic because in that day and age, girls were not encouraged in any way, shape, or form to go into the maths or the sciences. So you were already ahead of your time, and your determination and I'm going to do this, your motivation, self-motivation were incredible. So you've been accepted to the doctoral program. You've decided that you're going to do it. Talk a little bit more about that.
So graduate school was a little bit challenging for me because I came from an environment as an undergraduate that was a small, nurturing environment. Mm-hmm. And I got to graduate school and it was totally different. The first day on campus, I felt lost because I go from a school of 1,200 students to a school of 30,000 students, where at my small school, it was a historically black college. This was a majority institution. And so the very first day, I said, oh my Lord, what have I done? Right? Then, you know, there were some challenges being the only African American there.
Okay.
Sitting in the classes, being in my laboratory, and at the end of that first semester, I decided I was going to drop out.
Did you?
But, you know, because I was so incredibly frustrated with the entire circumstance. And so I rented a car. And back then I didn't have any money.
Sure.
But I had one credit card. It was a Sears credit card. And you could use Sears credit card to rent a car from Budget Rent-A-Car.
Okay.
So I walked to the Purdue airport, rented this car. I had barely enough money for gas, and I packed up peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and drove from Indiana to Virginia. And my family was in Maryland, but my grandmother was in Virginia.
Go to see
and
Grandma.
I went to see my grandmother
Grandma.
to talk to her about my experiences and why I felt so frustrated and inadequate in graduate school. And she gave me this talk that was about who I am and what kind of people I come from, and how she believed I was the smartest person she knew, and that she knew that I could be successful there. And I spent that entire day with my grandmother. Then I went to see my family. But my time with my grandmother motivated me to go back to Purdue and to succeed. And after that, I got A's in all of my graduate classes, and even when lab wasn't going well, I would think about my grandmother,
So
that got me through.
Your circumstances never changed, but your mentality, your thought process about those circumstances was at least soothed.
Oh yeah, it's always there. It's always there. It doesn't matter what situation I'm in. I always hear my grandmother talk about what I come from, right? And the kinds of people we are. We're very driven and motivated. The women in my family are incredibly strong. And when I wrote my dissertation, the beginning of it, I dedicated to all of the women in my family who'd gone before me. And I wrote the first stanza from Maya Angelou's Still We Rise, right? Because it was that personal to me. But graduate school was hard. Everybody knows graduate school is hard. But my work in graduate school, I'm a little bit, and I told you this, I'm a mutant. Only because, you know, if you look at my family,
Right.
I am the mutant because I'm just a little bit weird. And the thing that makes me very passionate is talking about biochemistry, because that is the coolest science there ever was.
Okay, I need to interrupt you now because I need to set the stage. I need to make sure that our audience is really engaged and paying attention and watching and understanding what we are about to talk about. You came from a very poor background. When I talked about you influencing your family, you were first. You were the first in your family to go to college, and then you just blasted that away. Now you're the president of a college. But your background, your PhD program in the sciences and biochemistry, when I mentioned a little while ago that you would not believe what Dr. Jordan is passionate about, I really want to set the stage for this and make sure you're engaged and watching. When you teach your students and you're in the classroom, you are so very passionate about?
My favorite enzyme, which is, to just say it easily, is that everybody knows about cholesterol.
Okay.
And there's this one chemical process in your body that controls the rate by which your body will make that cholesterol. And that enzyme that catalyzes that step is my favorite enzyme in the whole world. I mean, the structure is beautiful, the chemistry is just amazing, that this enzyme, to say, usually enzymes do one thing, you take one chemical group and convert it to the next one.
Okay.
This one is so cool that it takes that one chemical group and takes it down 2 steps. There are only 3 enzymes known to man that can do that kind of beautiful chemistry. And so every time I talk about it, I smile.
Do you remember talking about your 11th grade high school teacher, and he was beautiful and the way that he taught was incredible? I'm sure that one of your students is somewhere in the United States talking about this teacher that they had in college and trying to explain to an unsuspecting guest how enzymes are beautiful. I do love how you tell that story because you are so very passionate. You talk about being driven, you talk about your mom and your dad and your grandmother and the women in your family, but truthfully there is something inside of you that just rises up and says, I'm different and I'm going to do things in a very excellent manner. Your career has been filled with benchmarks, accomplishments, and accolades which have brought you here. I want to talk a little bit about those and ask you what you see for yourself going forward. So we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk some more about some of those accolades, what your thoughts are for St. Mary's College, and just a little bit about you in general, personally. All right, we're going to take a quick break. You're watching GAB with ALisa Profiles on MetroCast Channel 10.
Everybody knows Jeep is an American icon. It's fun on the road, off the road, to take you anywhere you want to go. Here at Fitzgerald, we have all the Jeep Chrysler models and our low posted price. There's no hassle, no haggle buying a car here. It's fun. Plus, it's backed up with Fitzway service.
Get 0% APR financing on almost every new 2015 Chrysler, Dodge, and Jeep.
Treat yourself to an American icon. That's the Fitzway. There's just no better way to go.
Moving into a new area is always tough, especially when it comes to problems in your home. We were unpacking our last box when our heat stopped working. I had no idea who to call until a neighbor suggested Booth's Heating and Air. And from the first phone call, right up to the final quality check, I was given professional customer service. Well, now we're all settled in, and next time, I'll know exactly who to call.
I'm Wayne Booth with Booth's Heating and Air Conditioning. Thank you for your business.
You're watching GAB with ALisa Profiles on MetroCast Channel 10. Thanks so much for coming back. We're talking to Dr. Tuajuanada Jordan from St. Mary's College. In our last segment, we mentioned that we were going to talk about accolades that you've received. And this is usually the part in the program where my guests are internally squirming in their seat because I don't like talking about myself. Mm-hmm. But it's very interesting for our viewers and for young people that might be watching this program. My whole thought process about this program is to encourage people that are coming behind us, because you and I are women of an age. Now we have a responsibility to look behind and say, come with us. Let us show you how to get from point A to point B. So let's talk about your accolades and the ones that in your career have been most impactful to you.
Mm-hmm. I think the very first one that humbled me was I was given the Revolutionary Mind Award by a magazine, and then really stemmed from my work I did at Howard Hughes Medical Institute with that science education program. But for me to receive that kind of recognition from people, and that program was just in its infancy then, really was cause for pause for me. Mm-hmm. And it shows something that I believe in. I love people who are creative and think outside the box. Mm-hmm. That's something I really very much appreciate, and for people to recognize me for doing that was just humbling. And then, my time at Purdue wasn't the best as far as I'm concerned. Granted, my work was really very important work. And I received years later the Distinguished Alumni Award. That was amazing to me, because in that environment I didn't think I was distinguished, right? But it was watching my career. Then the one that I'm really, the Torchbearer Award that I received just last semester from the Coalition of 100 Black Women. Yeah. I was on that stage and I saw those women who were being honored. And I was like, I am not at their level. And for people to think that my work in science education has been that kind of impactful work, it is just, I don't know what to do with it, right? I'm not even good at displaying them, right? So I just put them somewhere so that people won't. I don't want people to think I'm boastful or something.
No, and you are not. And I was researching for this show because I wanted to learn a little bit more about you and your background. And I showed you and I told you that the picture that St. Mary's College has on their website of you, having known you a little bit more, I think it speaks perfectly to your persona. The picture that's on the website is sheer joy. I'm assuming that it took place after you were set in as president at some academic event, because you're in.
It was my inauguration.
Okay, and you're in all your regalia, and the look on your face is just joy. It is less of an academic pose and more of a human, this is the best pose, and I think that really speaks to you.
Thank you. People who attended my inauguration talk about how different it was than any other inauguration event, because usually inaugurations are filled with so much pomp.
Right.
And I just I did not want to deal with the pomp, and so it had to reflect me as a person. And they talk about the circumstance, that every bit of it was Tuajuanada, and the people who spoke about Tuajuanada and how we just tried to bring in the entire community. And the fact that, I had to give this inaugural address, stressful enough, but in it I had to present my vision for the college early. Because generally what I wanted to do was to spend a year at the college before I articulate a vision. But there were people who wanted to know if there was a vision for it, and there was all this pressure, and so I put it out there. And I was holding my breath, right? Because you get ahead of the faculty, that's not a good thing, right? But the faculty stood up and applauded.
Wow.
I know, it was just like, this must be good stuff, right? So
I have a good plan.
Oh my goodness. Well, you don't want to get ahead of people.
Right.
You need to bring them into the conversation. And I was putting something out there, what I saw as the future. And you don't know how people are going to accept that.
Especially when you've not had an opportunity to really have in-depth conversations with a number of people. I want to ask you a question. Do you have a realization internally that you are a real part of history, not just at St. Mary's College, but American history? You're the 7th president at St. Mary's College. You have received these incredible national awards of recognition. There are just so many things that you have done that you are a historical figure in our country.
Well, it didn't occur to me that I was until I ended up in Wikipedia. Then that means I've made it, right?
You've made it. You're here.
That's the modern benchmark if you make it into Wikipedia. And, a couple years ago, my youngest brother said, "Do you know you're famous?" And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And he had Googled my name and things popped up. And I was like, oh my gosh, I wasn't really paying attention to that sort of thing, right? I just, as I told you earlier, I just do my work, right? And then you just see what comes out of it. But Wikipedia, that's it.
You have officially arrived.
That's exactly right.
We only have about a minute left, but I really want to put you on the spot. And I know the width, depth, and breadth of this question, but I still want to ask you, if you had one bit of advice for any of your students at St. Mary's College or any high school students considering going to college, what advice would that be?
I always tell students, no matter what, you always must make sure you do your best, because you never know who's looking and what circumstance will present itself in the future that you weren't even aware of, and someone taps you for it. There's no telling where it's going to lead you. But one thing I used to tell my children was, no matter what you do, before you do it, you always ask yourself, what would my mother say? That keeps you on the straight and narrow. That's it.
We all need new braces, WWMD. S, what would my mother say? Dr. Jordan, it's been a pleasure, and I think we could talk for at least another several hours. I'd love to know more about what your plans are for yourself, because they affect this wonderful community that we live in, and for the college and so forth. I think we'll have to have you back in again in the future to see how things are going at St. Mary's College, how things are going with you, and what you see going forward, because we live in one of the best communities in the world.
Well, thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I'll come back anytime you want me to.
Wonderful. There you go. Dr. Tuajuanada Jordan from St. Mary's College, a very bright spot in St. Mary's County and in our future. Thanks for joining us, GAB with ALisa Profiles. You're watching MetroCast Channel 10.